Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today we continue our study of Sefer Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, and we are about to study together chapter 13. The chapter continues in a similar pattern to the previous chapters in this second section of the book of Mishlei, where we discuss the numerous proverbs that compare and contrast the wise person with the foolish person, the evil person with the righteous person, the truthful person with the deceitful person. So as we continue on this theme, let's look at verse number 1. Begins as follows: Bein chacham musar av. The literal translation is grammatically difficult to understand, because Bein chacham literally means a wise son, musar av, father's rebuke, right? In other words, there's no connecting adverbs or adjectives here, so there's various ways to understand it. The easiest way to understand this is there's a deliberate reason why there's no connecting words here, because it's imagining if you're looking at someone and you see a wise person, you should see automatically. It should be so automatic you don't even need a word to connect, right? You don't even need a conjunction or anything. Bein chacham, it's because of musar av. It's because that the father raised him properly, taught him properly. And so that would be, I think, the most reasonable translation of this verse. And most commentaries take some version of that understanding. But I'm just focusing in on the deliberate fact that this is a grammatically unusual statement for a reason. Velates, but a cynic, lo shama ge'ara. He'd never listened. He never paid any attention to rebuke. Alates, the cynic, he just never listened. Maybe his father did rebuke him. Who knows? Maybe his father did try to teach him. But regardless, we know, or maybe he didn't. But regardless, we know for sure he did not pay any attention. He didn't listen. Mi pri pi'ish yochal tov. From the fruits of a man's mouth. Now, one thing, if you haven't noticed this by now, then you haven't been paying any attention at all. The book of Proverbs focuses very, very frequently and deeply on the idea that the way we speak, the way we interact with other people, the things that we say should always be proper. We should be careful, not talk when we don't need to. Be careful what we say is true. Be careful not to hurt other people with our speech. So from the fruits of a man's mouth, yochal tov, you eat well. Meaning, if you watch what you say properly and you speak kindly and nicely to others, then you will eat well. You'll have friends at your house. You'll go to their houses. You'll eat together. You'll have good company. And if you need food, they'll lend you or give you and help you. Yochal tov, v'nefesh bogdim chamas. But on the flip side, the very soul of those who are bogdim, who literally means who are rebellious, but in this sense it means rebellious against others. They're treacherous against others. They lie, they cheat, they don't get along with others. They're the opposite of the person who speaks well. Chamas, all you have is chamas. Now chamas, again, is, I've emphasized this numerous times, refers specifically to people taking advantage of others. It's the kind of environment where yes, stealing is taking place, but chamas is a specific type of stealing. Is where people use their power, whether it's physical strength or political strength or whatever it is, to take advantage of others and unfairly and unjustly. And that's the kind of world that the bogade lives in, as opposed to the person who speaks nicely. Notzer piv, of course, continuing on the theme of speaking properly, verse 3. Notzer piv, a person who watches his mouth and is careful about his speech. Shomer nafsho, he is guarding his soul, right? He's guarding his own life. So in other words, you're taking care of yourself. It's not only nice because you're being nice to other people, but you're taking care of yourself. But poshek sifasav, one who opens his mouth wide, mechita lo, that becomes a trap for him. A mechita is a trap. So, if you keep talking too much, your words are gonna come back to haunt you. Misaveh v'ayin. If you see someone, again, this is another form similar to the first verse, where it's trying to convey, similar to the first verse, where there's no connecting, no conjunction here. In other words, it's trying to convey the idea that when you see something, it's just so obvious that I don't even need to tell you. Misaveh v'ayin. If a person wants something but never gets it, nafsho atzel, it's because his soul is lazy, right? He's never trying it, right? V'nefesh chorutzim tidushan, but the soul of the person who is diligent and works hard, he will have, literally that means fat, fair, but the fat meaning a successful wealth. Not necessarily money here, but it could mean that too. But if he's diligent, he works hard, that's the one who you'll see be successful. Devar sheker, a false word, yisnot tzaddik, the righteous person hates it. When a righteous person is listening to a conversation or watching the news or watching a video short and he sees falsehood being stated, it's repulsive to him. He stays away from it. V'rasha, but a rasha, an evil person, takes that false word and yav ish v'yachpir, and he uses it to embarrass and shame others. You take that false fact and you use it to hurt other people. That is the difference. A tzaddik runs away from the false fact, whereas the rasha takes that false fact, takes that and uses it to create division, to cause pain and suffering for others. You may see different translations. Sometimes I go a little bit more detail into the translations that I'm using, and sometimes I don't. But over here, it's important to really see the form of the word. Yavish v'yachpir. It doesn't mean. Some of the translations are just simply wrong. Where they use it as a description of the rasha. The rasha, I see one, the wicked man is vile. That's not what it means. Yavish means he makes others embarrassed. V'yachpir. I don't know all the English terms for grammar that well, but I think I'm making my point pretty clear. Yavish v'yachpir in Hebrew means he makes others embarrassed. He makes others ashamed. Tzedakah titzor tamdarach. Righteousness guards and takes care of. So you might think, well, at least the rasha, he's doing okay on his own because he's hurting other people, but he's doing okay on his own. No. Tzedakah, being righteous, titzor tamdarach. It guards, it takes care of he who is proper, who walks on the proper road. A tam is a person who does the right thing because it's the right thing. He goes the right way because it's the right way. He stays on the right path because it's the right path. If it's not, I'm emphasizing this because that's the meaning of the word tam. It's simple, but simple not in a derogatory sense, but as simple in the sense that it's just plain and easy. There's the right path and the wrong path, and he always chooses the right one. Verisha tisalef chatas. But wickedness, which is the opposite, of course, of righteousness, tisalef chatas. The best translation for that would be it makes the sinner slip and fall. Chatos here is presumably a reference to the sinner himself, right? So wickedness makes you slip up, it ruins you, it pushes you away from the path. So whereas righteousness guards you and keeps you straight and takes care of you, wickedness makes you slip and fall and fail. Yesh misasher v'ein kol. This is a clearly a lesson that we all see so many times. You may see someone who looks wealthy. There are many people who appear to be wealthy. They pretend that they're wealthy. V'ein kol, but the truth is they have nothing. They pretend they have all kinds of things. This is true not just in wealth, but it's true in so many things in life. How many people are there that talk and pretend they know what they're talking about, but v'ein kol, but there's nothing there? How many people give advice online nowadays and have millions and millions of clicks and likes and actually have no idea what they're talking about? None, zero, zip, zilch, right? But yes, mis asher, there are those that walk around and pretend they're rich, v'ein kol, but the truth is there's nothing there. They don't have anything. Misrosesh, there are those who pretend that they have nothing, that they have poor v'hon rav, but in truth they're a great treasure. So there are some people that walk around unassuming. They don't brag. They're not arrogant. They don't have a million followers on Instagram. But hon rav, the truth is they're a tremendous treasure, a tremendous value, and they have so much to give and offer. This next verse, verse 8, is a little bit of a challenge. Well, not so much a challenge, but there's different ways to understand it. I'm going to give a couple. Verse 8, kofer nefesh ish. Kofer, if I read according to the Trupp, according to the annotations of the Masoretic text, you have kofer nefesh ish ashro. The kofer, the redemption, right, or the sometimes translated the ransom, right, of the nefesh ish, of the soul of a man, is ashro, is his wealth. Now, what is this saying? And the flip side seems a little unusual. Virash, but the poor man, lo shama ge'ara, does not hear rebuke. Now, what does this mean? That rush lo shama ge'ara reminds us, of course, of the first verse that we started, where it compared a wise son who listens to his father's rebuke and discipline, and elates a cynic who is lo shama ge'ara, who did not listen to rebuke. So that first verse made a lot of sense. There's the one who listens and the one who doesn't, the one who's humble enough to take criticism constructively, and the one who's too arrogant to do so. But this one, it doesn't seem to be that way. So there's different ways to understand it. But a traditional way that we see from Rashi and the Mitzudos is they look at this as kofer nefesh ish ashro. A person can buy or purchase his soul with his wealth. How? By using his wealth the right way, he can gain benefit by giving others tzedakah, by giving charity, by helping others, by using his wealth to help, right? The problem with this one is that it's a nice idea, and of course it's a wonderful way of understanding it, but it doesn't realize, it doesn't make it that easy to understand the flip side, the second half of the verse. So the way Rashi goes with that is, v'rush lo shama ge'ara, if the way you buy yourself is with osher, is with wealth, in other words, using your wealth properly. V'rush, and the poor man, don't yell at him, don't embarrass him, don't shame him, which is also a very nice idea, and it's a wonderful way, of course, of understanding the verse, but it doesn't really fit with the pattern of this chapter, of all these chapters, where you have A and contrast B, A, contrast B, so on and so forth. So then it would be one whole thought. But it's fine. That's a beautiful way to understand it nonetheless, and a beautiful lesson. Another way is the Ralbag understands this. A kofer is people are jealous of the person who is wealthy, right? So kofer never, and he has to buy their buy peace by giving them, right? By giving out money, which is another way of understanding that. But a poor man, lo shama ge'ara, nobody yells at him because nobody cares about him, right? Everyone's jealous of the rich man, and he constantly has to make donations, and he constantly has to spread his money out so that everyone likes him, right? Whereas a poor man, nobody's bothering with him, nobody's yelling at him. So in some sense, there's a little bit positive, a tiny bit of positive in being the poor man, where you don't have to get rid of all your things. So that would be another way of understanding it. And again, there you at least have the contrast, which fits in the pattern. The more modern scholars understand this differently as kind of a rebuke of government, right? Where when you're wealthy, the government is always going to come after you with taxes, right? Kofer nefesh ish ashro. His wealth is always going to constantly be a target, right? For the government, right? Is always going to target his wealth, right? But a rush, the poor man, he goes about his business and nobody really cares. The government doesn't bother him because he has nothing for them to take away. So, that's true about the government. It's similar to the Ralbag's idea, whether it's a government or other people or the community. The wealthy man is constantly being bothered, and he constantly has to redeem himself with his wealth, but not the poor man. Or tzaddikim. So those are some ways of understanding verse 8. If you have other ways that you understand it, of course, there's many ways. That's the whole point of a proverb. There isn't one specific meaning. There's many meanings, and it could be meaningful to different people in different ways. Or tzaddikim yismach, the light of tzaddikim, the light of righteous people. Yismach is something that makes him happy, makes others happy. It spreads happiness, right? A tzaddik, a righteous person, when he comes to the room, when he comes to the party, people, it brings peace. It brings brotherly compassion and love and happiness. What surrounds him is happiness. V'ner rishaim, but the flame of a rasha, the flame is the fire which a tzaddik uses to give light. But a rasha just has the flame, but it's not giving any light, right? The evil person, yid'ach, the flame itself is going to be crushed and put out, right? Because he has nothing to give, nothing to offer those that surround him. Verse 10, Rak bizadon yitain matzah. This is also a little bit challenging to translate, but I'm going to go with the most true to the diktuk, to the grammar of the words. Rak bizadon, only with arrogance, yitain matzah, does somebody give or does somebody participate in fighting, in strife. Meaning that all arguments, all strife comes from arrogance. Period. There's no I see some translations which I do believe are completely wrong that say that to flip it the other way around, that arrogance leads to strife. But that's not the right translation of the words. The translation here is it is only through arrogance that fighting happens, right? So it's not teaching us about arrogance so much as it's teaching us about fighting, right? If you see a fight, right, how did it come about? It came about because of arrogance. I mean, of course, the bottom line is in the end, you learn that arrogance leads to fighting, and fighting is caused by arrogance, right? A equals B, and B also equals A. But the meaning of the verse is as I stated it, and so if you see two people fighting, don't think, well, maybe, no, it's arrogance. Somebody was not humble enough to admit that they could be wrong. Probably both of them are not humble enough to admit that they might be wrong, and thereby come to some sort of resolution of the conflict. V'et no'atzim chachma, right? And those who take advice from others, that is where you see wisdom, right? So if you see wisdom, right, as opposed to fighting and strife, remember, wisdom has been equated with truth. Truth has been equated with humility. Humility has been equated with those who speak nicely and spread ratzon and kindness and love among others. And those are the ones that don't fight, right? That spread peace, shalom. These are repeating themes that we've had spread out throughout the Proverbs until now. So wisdom, if you see wisdom and you see all of those wonderful things that I just described, no'atzim, then you see the kinds of people who are humble, who take advice. As Proverbs has said so many times, repeatedly over and over again, that to take advice is to be humble. To be humble is to be honest, and to be honest is to be wise. Hon mehevel yimat. Now, in verse 11, this is interesting, because there's also various translations of this. But again, I'm going to focus and zero in on the actual meaning of the words and the proper grammar here. And then you will see some beautiful lessons. Hon, wealth, mehevel, that comes from nothing, yimat, will eventually dwindle away. Now, so hevel means nothing. It can also mean worthless or useless or something in a negative way. Nothing could be simply the absence of something, right? But nothing could also be a word that's describing something. Oh, that's a useless, worthless, meaning a bad thing, right? So some understand this, that Hon, the Evan Ezra and Mitsudos and others understand Hevel here to be referring to wealth that was gained in an ill-begotten way, and that was gained through dishonesty, stealing, etc. Such treasure, yimat, will go away. V'kovetz al yad yarbeh, but a person who works hard and honest and gathers slowly, yarbeh, he will end up with a lot. So according to this interpretation, the contrast is between a person who comes about his wealth honestly versus a person who comes about his wealth dishonestly. A much better translation here, I believe, is most of the modern scholars understand it this way, and I think it fits better with the words, is hon mehevel yimat, is that when somebody gets quickly wealthy, right? You win the lottery and bam, now you have $1 million in the bank. Now it's wonderful, it's great, you have $1 million in the bank, right? But yimat, typically what we find is that wealth disappears quickly. But a kovetz al yad, and one of the reasons why this translation is better is because of the second half of the verse, which doesn't say anything about good or bad, but it talks about al yad, meaning piece by piece, part by part, little by little. That's what al yad means. So v'kovetz al yad yarbeh, but a person who works hard and builds up his wealth slowly, yarbeh, he will end up being wealthy. So it's just it's a observation about human nature and wealth in general, which we see to be true. And that when you come by wealth quick and fast, and maybe not always, but very often, it gets lost quickly. But when you work hard, little by little, and you accumulate it that way, then it lasts. Tocheles mimushacha machla leiv. Again, this is a similar pattern to verse 1. We find this in this chapter a lot, where again, there's no conjunction here. It says, Tocheles mimushacha, which means hope, or what's the better word than hope? Well, when somebody desperately hopes for something, mimushacha, and it's drawn out, right? We're not talking about a hope. When you hope for something that may happen, that you want to happen in the future, that's one thing. But when it's deliberately drawn out longer and longer, like you make a promise to somebody, and then you keep on saying, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow, and there's somebody who's waiting and waiting. Yeah, tomorrow, next day, next year, next time. Machlo leiv. It causes a sickness in the heart. It causes someone to be depressed and anxious, etc. Machlo leiv. Ve'etz chayim tava ba'a. But it is a tree of life. It gives life to a person when your desires ba'a, when desires are fulfilled. So this is again a very important and wonderful observation, right? Which we all know to be true. And it's important in how we deal with other people. If you make a promise to somebody that they really want fulfilled and you keep drawing it out, probably better that you never made the promise in the first place, or just do it like you said you would. But if you do fulfill it, when someone has a desire for something and you fulfill it, you really give them sustenance, you give them pleasure in a wonderful way and satisfaction. Now, this last verse is a really wonderful one, and again, there's a lot of different interpretations. And again, I'm not here to say which one is better or worse, but I'm gonna try to stick as close as I can to the meaning of the words, and we will come up with a beautiful lesson that Mishlei is trying to teach us. Baz ledavar, if someone is buzz lidavar, meaning if somebody disdains something, or somebody makes fun of something, or somebody denigrates something, right? Now, many understand this davar to be a word meaning a precept or a mitzvah from the Torah. I'm not going to translate it that way now. I'll mention it in a minute, but I'm going to translate it as davar here as a thing as opposed to a word. Often davar means a thing, right? So when you disdain something, yechavel lo. And the reason why I'm saying that is because yechavel it means you become indebted to it. Yechavel is referring to like an object which is used as a security on a loan, and you end up losing it, right, because you owe somebody money. So buzz lidavar, when you make fun of something, when you denigrate something, when you don't take something seriously, that thing itself is going to be what you're going to suffer from, what you're going to owe your lifeblood to, right? Because, and we see this so often, a person doesn't take something seriously, that is the thing that's going to come back and get them. When you had a chance and you knew what you were aware of possible obstacles, but you ignored one and you said, that's nothing, or I'm not worried about those guys. Those guys, they're never gonna, or imagine in a situation of war when you just make fun of you don't take your enemies seriously, and you don't think that they're strong enough or smart enough. Those are the ones that are going to hurt you in the end. You need to take them seriously. Virei mitzvah, and those literally that means who are respectful towards a mitzvah, towards a command, right? Hu yishulam, he is the one that will be repaid. Now, if we know from the context of Mishlei until this point, yira, one who is who literally that means afraid or in awe of. But yira comes from humility, and we've seen this repeatedly over and over again. Yirei mitzvah means a person who is humble, right? Humble enough to listen, right, to a command. The kind of person who is humble enough to listen is the kind of person who takes everything seriously. When I tell him that the enemy is behind that ridge, he doesn't say, I'm not worried about those guys. They're not going to do, they're a bunch of losers. They're not smart enough to do anything. We're better than them. And then in the end, he suffers from them. So many things in our life, but if we don't take seriously, and they're the ones that come back and get us. But if you're Yirei mitzvah, hu yishulam, if you take it seriously, then you are going to be paid in the end. And as opposed to it being something that you're indebted to for your life, it'll be something, because you took it seriously, it'll be something that you get money from, or get support from, get success from, depending on, of course, the situation for the rest of your life. So this is about halfway through the chapter. Thank you so much for studying chapter 13a, the first half with me. I hope you learned something today. I hope you took something from this that will help you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Again, I wish all of you a wonderful day. If you have comments, please comment anywhere in any of the forums online, and I do my best to answer them. Or if you have friends that you think may be interested, please invite them. And if you'd like to send me something in private, feel free to email me at weinrebsaul, that's WEINREBSAUL, @gmail.com. Again, have a wonderful, wonderful day.